I live in a small town on Lake Superior. I've known of several supposedly haunted lighthouses around the area, but I was unaware of any activity in the lighthouse in the city that I live in. So I was pleasantly surprised when I heard they were offering paranormal tours of the lighthouse. I really didn't expect much to happen, but I decided that it might be fun for my wife and I to go. The first time we went was a pretty wild ride. That story's for another time, but our crew got several intelligent responses via EVP recordings. But the second time was pretty neat. Long story short, it's believed that the spirit of a child resides at the lighthouse. There was a group of 6 of us, and we were all in the basement. One of the investigators leading the tour was trying to contact the child spirit. A fellow tourgoer had eagerly volunteered to lug around the SLS camera for the past hour and a half. I tried to carry around the box where spirits would pick out words, but right when I grabbed it, it said wrong. And that was a huge nope for me. The tour was coming to a close without him noticing anything on the camera at all. I was standing across the room from the man with the SLS camera when I noticed that the hair on my arms was standing on end and my skin was tingling. I went to say something to my wife, but before I could, she grabbed me and told me her opposite hand had gone ice cold. Seconds after, the guy across the room with the SLS camera called me to come over. I walked over to find that there was a small stick figure that appeared to be holding my wife's hand, the hand that she had said was freezing. It wasn't like a flash and then it was gone. I stayed for several minutes. My wife would move over and it would show up again. I remember sitting on my bed, either watching Netflix or playing something on my PS4. I can't remember exactly. But all I heard outside my window was cow noises, like really close to my window. I was getting freaked out. I texted my cousin about it and she asked if there were cows near my home. I told her yeah, but not that close where I can hear them. She told me that maybe one of them got out, but it also didn't really sound like a cow, if that makes any sense. It sounded like a woman in stress as well, mixed in with a cow. I don't know, it just freaked me out. And my room is a whole story itself. My uncle literally died in my room, and the bed frame he died on was given to me for a while, but I ended up giving it to my sister. And speaking of my room, it was the hottest room in the whole house. On certain days, you could open both windows and still somewhat be hot. I don't know if those accounts are paranormal. I know something being cold ones. Just thought I'd mention it. Speaking of my sister, here's story number 2. I remember being in my sister's room, scrolling through Musically, when suddenly, in the corner of my eye, I saw something in the doorway. It wasn't just standing there, it was crawling on the floor. It looked like a woman. She had greyish skin, long black hair, and she was bent over like spider style, if that makes any sense. She was wearing a long white dress. As soon as I saw that, I literally started crying. I jumped out of bed and slammed the door shut. I jumped back on the bed and hid under the covers. Story number 3. I remember being in the kitchen with my sister. We were jumping around, acting like idiots, when suddenly we both heard something outside the window. It sounded like a chainsaw going off. I peeked out and nobody was there, but it was so close to the window. Like really close. Me and my sister just ran towards my room and locked the door. Story number 4. I was in my room sitting down on my bed, about to go to sleep. I opened my eyes a little and saw something in the corner of my room. It was a man in a hat. I immediately turned on my little lamp beside my bed. When I turned on the light, it wasn't there anymore. I was so freaked out and I didn't go to sleep. And just recently, I looked up Man in a Hat Paranormal, and it turns out it has something related to childhood trauma. Explains a lot. Story number 5. Every single time I'd go into my kitchen and get something from the fridge, I'd feel like I'm being watched. I always felt that in my house, but whenever I got something to eat or drink, it would feel stronger. I don't know how to explain it, but it just felt off. Speaking of that, I remember getting something to drink. It was on the top shelf, and the way my fridge was made, I could kind of climb up to it. There was a little room for my feet, and as soon as I was about to get it, I felt something touch my shoulder. I thought it was my dad or mom, but whenever I looked, nobody was there. I just climbed down and ran to the living room. This experience happened about 4 or 5 years ago. I was 18 or 19 at the time, and I've always wondered about it. I was on vacation with my family, brother, cousins, aunts and uncles, etc. We were staying in a beach cottage for a week. My brother, cousin and I all slept in the same room. As the youngest family member, I picked the short straw and slept on the cot, while my brother and cousins slept in the 2 beds that our room provided. One night, I was sleeping in my cot when all of a sudden, I felt this hand on my chest start to pull me off my cot onto the floor. It scared the shit out of me, and for whatever reason, when I woke up, I called to my cousin, who, to my surprise, was already awake. When I told him what had just happened to me, he said that seconds before I called him, he had a dream of a dark figure crawling on the ceiling and staring down on me. After he woke up from this, he said that no more than 30 seconds went by before I called him. This completely freaked us, and we ended up sleeping downstairs on the couch. Normally, I would chalk this up to sleep paralysis, but the fact that my cousin and I both had related experiences makes me question if this was paranormal in nature. We've also experienced lights moving around in the room in years prior, but I always thought it was some illusion of the window shades or something that has freaked us out before too. In the summer of 2016, I attended a graduation party in my hometown. At around 10 p.m, I decided to say my goodbyes and head down the mountain myself. As I reached the summit of the mountain, my headlights illuminate a horrific scene to my right. A wrecked red sedan, with the front window shattered and a man laying in front of the car. I steered quickly out of the way, since his head was nearly on the white line of my lane. A few feet away from the scene, I pulled off into the truck lane, put my hazards on, and stared in shock in my rear-view mirror. A few seconds later, I see car lights coming my way, slowing down at the scene. I try to wave them down, but it's dark, secluded, and I'm in shock. It was unsuccessful. They slow down, look at the scene, and hit the gas full speed down the mountain. After they passed me, my anxiety kicked in, and I too fled the scene at full speed. I called my boyfriend at the time and didn't tell him what I saw. I needed to distract myself. About 8 minutes later, when I arrive home, I wake up my parents and waste no time getting everyone in the car to drive me up to the summit. In the meantime, we called the police. I didn't do this earlier because I was fresh out of high school and didn't know if I would have to stay at the scene, if I would be questioned, in trouble for being out so late and so young. I panicked. By the time my parents and I make it back to the summit, there's nothing there. It was less than 20 minutes. I got out in shock, looked for broken glass from the windshield and any other signs that someone had been hurt there. Nothing. Now I'm freaking out because I look as if I'm hallucinating all of this. My parents called the police again, and we left as the emergency services arrived. I've talked to a few people from my hometown, and they told me they wouldn't be surprised if I saw something paranormal. Because of all the accidents that have happened there, I personally know a few people who have died driving on that road. The only explanation I could think of was that it was an elaborate staged accident to lure someone out of their car. But the windshield was broken. His head was by the white line. If he wasn't dead already, he was placing himself in serious danger. The airbags were depleted, and the car was smashed by a telephone pole. How could someone stage that and be gone in less than 20 minutes? Even if the wreck did just happen, how would that have been able to walk away from the scene and not leave his car or other evidence behind? So I grew up in Sunnyvale, California in the early 2000s, and I loved going to our city's Toys R Us as a kid. However, there were always rumours about it being haunted. I remember some kids at my elementary school telling stories about how boxes would inexplicably be pushed off shelves by a ghost in the store. I always thought it was just kids telling stories to try and scare each other. I never thought much of it and just considered it an urban legend, since nothing paranormal had ever happened to me in that store. But when I was about 13 years old, I had a strange experience in that Toys R Us that made me change my mind about the whole legend being a hoax. On the day in question, my family was going to Toys R Us because my little brother wanted to buy something. My best friend and I decided to go too because we hadn't been to that store in years. While we were waiting for my little brother to find the toy he wanted, my friend and I were exploring through all the aisles in the store, messing around and having fun with toys. Finally, we reached the back of the store, and by this time we were bored with looking at toys, so we just stood in the aisle and talked. Eventually, the topic of the store being haunted was brought up, and while we were talking about it, a box suddenly flew off the shelf behind my friend, almost hitting her in the back of the head. This was pretty freaky, especially since we had just been talking about the supposed Toys R Us haunting. We weren't too scared at this point though, since this could easily be explained by the box not being placed on the shelf very well and falling off due to gravity. Although I did remember seeing the box before it fell off the shelf, and I remember it looking like it was pretty stable. But we just brushed this off and continued talking. However, a few moments later, the lights that were hanging from the ceiling above us began violently shaking back and forth. My friend and I stared up at the ceiling, frozen in shock. After a few seconds, the lights stopped shaking and we both stared at each other like, what just happened? I started to feel more uneasy, but the incident with the lights could also be explained by something normal. The area where we were had a second floor above it, which I think was a staff area. So I tried to tell myself that someone must have been doing something on the floor above us that caused the lights to shake by accident. In any case, my friend and I moved to the next aisle over, just in case the lights might fall on us. The aisle we were in now had a lot of stuffed animal toys in it. Both of us were just standing there talking about the things that had just happened to us when a toy monkey on a shelf next to us began moving all on its own and making a creepy laughy sound. We both stared at it in disbelief, and we stared at each other and started screaming. We sprinted out the store as fast as we could. But once we got outside, we couldn't just leave because we had to wait for my brother to finish buying his toy. We waited in the parking lot and tried to rationalize what had just happened. We talked about it and decided that the monkey toy could have been one of those motion-activated toys, and so we must have set the toy's motion sensor off somehow. But we didn't know this for sure. So my friend and I somehow worked up the courage to go back into the store and inspect the monkey toy to see if it really was motion activated. We carefully studied the toy and read its package, but there was nothing that mentioned it was motion activated. The only way you could make the monkey move and talk was if you pressed a button on its body. There was no way we could have pressed the button by accident. When we realized it truly went off all by itself, we started screaming all over again and ran out of the store for the last time. I'd like to preface this by saying, while I sincerely respect everyone's opinion, and to give me advice in any form is appreciated, if you're unwilling to suspend your disbelief and would rather suggest I have a mental illness and to seek help, thank you, but I don't need your comment. I personally sought out being hospitalized and evaluated, and was told I didn't have one. I did immediately take that path to address this when it first began. I can infrequently and at random hear very short snippets of other people's thoughts. Yes, I do not have a mental illness. This has been going on for about 2.5 or 3 years, and first, for quite a while, I ignored it. Like I was in denial, and I doused myself in skepticism, and I worried for my brain. As time passed and it continued, I gave up on that. I had and will always have that little skeptic that's telling me it's not real. What I hear are one-word thoughts or very short sentences, completely at random, very sporadically, coming from people in my vicinity. It's not a crazy, wild, powerful superpower. It's never going to be helpful to swindle millions or win big. It's literally just completely random, useless, mundane shit. I probably hear a foreign thought 1 or 2 or less times a week. It's so unpredictably random and infrequent that to study it, experiment, or try to solidly prove it would be like catching lightning in a bottle. It started around about a week ago. For some background, I live in a 1920s home. I live with 2 other people who are currently out of town, and if it's relevant, the house flooded a couple of weeks ago and there's black mould, but very sparse. Also, the back door doesn't lock, so it could be someone coming in. Also, there is an attic which I don't have access to, which is also supposedly flooded after the maintenance man came to have a look after the flooding of the house. A few weird things have been happening. For example, today, I wake up in the morning and go to the bathroom, and keep in mind again, my roommates are out of town. I find the pot plant on the top shelf has been knocked over. Keep in mind that I do own a kitten, but she can't even push down a 250-gram container. She's only 5 weeks old and can't jump onto the bed without help. The toilet seat is also up, which as a female, why would I ever do that? I work from home most days. I go into the kitchen for a drink and the microwave door is wide open and not closed. I don't use the microwave at all. A few other things have been happening as well. I'm quite particular about how I position my soaps in the shower. I've been noticing for the past week that they haven't been in the spot I left them in. I thought I was going insane, so I started taking photos before and after my shower to confirm where I've left them. They are definitely moving. Not to mention that there's a brown boot mark on the whole tile when again, I don't leave the house nor I am that size shoe. I've checked with all of my shoes and none of them match. I like to order Subway. I'm a bit of a Subway fiend. I ordered a foot long, but half of it to eat later. I've popped that in the fridge and never got round to eating it as I had a few work events that I had to attend in person. Very rare. The Subway I noticed is also gone today. No one has been home, so I'm confused who ate it. Also, to make me sound even crazier, I ran out of makeup remover the other day, and I went to reach for a cleanser that I don't like that I got as a free gift from a pharmacy, and I've noticed that it's literally been duplicated. I now own 2 of these very specific cleansers that look exactly the same. I never went out of my way to purchase this product, considering that I don't even like it. Why would I buy it again? When I was a 12-year-old child, I had this weird experience that I could never properly explain. It was a summer night. I live in a tropical country, so it was particularly hot that day. I played the entire day inside water, as a kid should, then at night went to sleep. All lights were out and the air conditioning was on full potency, an old and loud machine that's probably as old as me. I was looking at the dark ceiling, waiting for the need for sleep to come. At that moment, I noticed something. There was a dark spot on the ceiling that was even darker than the rest of the room. And to my surprise, it started to move. Went to walls, then floor, then walls again, just as my eyes kept following it. Then it stopped and accelerated again, directly to the ceiling portion right above me. I was paralyzed, probably because of the usual fear that a kid would feel, and there I stayed for a few moments. I can't say for certain if a few seconds or minutes had passed, but definitely felt like a long time. My eyes fixed on the dark spot, and I felt that it was fixed without eyes towards me. Suddenly, it jumped, not the walls or the floor, but to me. And for a brief moment, I could see the shape of a mouth, in a motion as if to bite my face. At the exact same moment, the loud air conditioning turned off. I screamed and waited in panic for my parents to come to the rescue. I was on the same bed, too shaken to move. My parents entered the room to see if everything was okay. Well, I was okay. Scared, but okay. I was more calm after I had talked to them. Apparently, the electric power of the entire house went off. Nothing else happened. I even actually slept at some point after that. Back when I was a small child, I lived in this 2-story home in a small town in California, up these hills in the orange groves. The way the house was set up is there's just a kitchen and living room on the bottom floor, and there were stairs on the back wall that led up to one huge bedroom with a bathroom. The room was shaped kind of like an L. So I had my own bed next to the bathroom door, and my parents were on the other side. One night, I had my cousin over for a sleepover. It was pretty dark in the room. The bathroom light was on, and just a little cracked open, giving us some light. My parents were asleep, and my cousin and I were laying in bed talking, when all of a sudden, we saw this completely black shadow figure walking by the bathroom door. I vividly remember what it looked like. He looked to be a man. He was really hunched over and for some reason had his hands out in front of him. He had long fingers pointing down. My cousin and I both grabbed the covers and hid as long as we could. We whispered to each other that we thought someone had broken in. We were terrified and didn't know what to do. We listened under the covers for a while, and it was nothing but dead silence. We hid until we managed to fall asleep. By the morning, we had woken up and told my parents everything, that someone had broken in. Of course, my mom didn't believe us and said we were imagining it all. My dad, on the other hand, I'm not sure what he was thinking because he had multiple paranormal experiences in this home that we later found out about because he didn't want to scare us at the time living there. That's a whole other story though. Fast forward a few years later. We moved to another home in the next town over. Here, I had my own bedroom. I was scared of the dark, so my mom would always leave the hall light on for me, with my door wide open, and it would light up the whole wall where my closet is. One night, while laying in bed, once again, I saw the same exact shadow figure I had seen. This time he was in the light. My heart stopped. He was this big, black fog that I can completely see through. I couldn't make out any face shape or features. He was once again hunched over with his hands out in front of him, long fingers, just walking slow and casually. I was terrified, and I cried myself to sleep that night under my covers. This was the last time I had seen him. So a couple of years ago, I lived in another city, and this particular period, I was actually staying at a friend's dorm room. My friend's girlfriend had a dog, and one night she asked me if I could walk it. So I did. It was the perfect opportunity for me, considering I had a pre-roll. I really wanted to smoke, but I didn't want to upset the neighbours. The dorm was located near a lot of factories and a few houses, but it's basically surrounded by big fenced factories and industrial buildings. So I was walking and smoking, and I went down the side road not a long way from the dorm. But then I went back to the main road, given the whole vibe was just creepy, and there was nobody around, and I was a little paranoid maybe. When I came back up to the main road, suddenly I felt like somebody was behind me, but not right behind me. However, I felt a presence, so I turned around to look. Upon looking right away, I see someone at the corner I had just passed when coming back to the main road. I look away again because I don't want to be rude and stare. However, this is also when I think about what I saw. Something was just off. I could only see the silhouette of a person, given that it was dark and it was right under a big road light. When I reviewed inside my head what I just saw, it appeared this person was hovering and with their arms slanted, and the silhouette of their hair looked like an afro. It was giant, so I looked back. This is maybe 5 seconds since I turned around, and the person was gone. So, I almost shit myself, given that I was high. I called my friends and told them I saw a ghost. They didn't really believe me, and told me that maybe somebody was trying to make me freak me out. The thing is, I used to go to rehab, and I met a lot of great but troubled people at rehab. I once met a guy who was only there for a few weeks, but I connected with him so much. He was a very passionate dude with a lot of love for life and spirituality, but he was a shattered person, and sadly, he hung himself. He hung himself at his home. This would be just about 100 meters from where I saw this person. But my friend never had an afro, so I really thought about that. Maybe his head was just disfigured. I obviously started Googling all sorts of stuff about this particular area. Then I found another scary thing. There had been only 2 clown sightings ever in the city I lived in, and one was a couple of years ago, in a parking lot maybe a kilometre from where I saw this person. So yeah, either way, ghost or clown, I'll never forget that day. I personally have shifted into believing that it was somebody pretending to be a clown and scaring me. This is just really scary to me, given that I was all alone where I was at, and at the end, they were standing. It really did look like they were floating. I don't know, you guys. I just really wanted to share this because it's a little creepy. My actual question to you regarding the story is whether or not y'all think it's just a clown, or maybe it was actually my friend. Could there be another explanation for the afro, and could it be maybe a disfigured head? I'm not an expert at all, but I'm trying to rule out the fact that my friend showed himself to me. Ever since I can remember, I've been having nightmares with a black shadow man, who whenever comes closer to me in those nightmares, says to me, "You're mine. You can't escape. I'll always find you. I'll get you. You'll see. You'll never escape. I'm always here." And things along those lines. I was around 14 to 19 back then. It's gotten to the point where I kind of learned how to wake myself up whenever I'm having nightmares and I see a black shadow figure that could be or not that shadow man. I start screaming inside my nightmare, "Wake up now! Get up! Wake up! Please wake up!" And then people who's been in bed with me tell me that I start murmuring until I end up screaming, "Ah!" and wake up, as if I'm running a marathon and with bradycardia, fast heart palpitations. And it takes me around 5 to 10 minutes to calm down and understand the fact that I'm not in my head anymore, but in real life. Last time I dreamed of it, I was in total darkness, and I felt like I fell onto a bed, and to my right there was a window, and a strange silhouette with a strange figure, and I stupidly became curious of what it was and came closer to the window. And when I realized it, the face of it was right in front of me. It seemed human, but with black irises, no hair. The skin was black, pitch black, like space black. But it was so black, it seemed like it was a void. Like it had no skin at all, but you could still see a bit of texture. And then he asked, more like motioned me, to follow him through a door. Which I effing didn't, because in that precise moment, my boyfriend woke me up. Because I was talking saying, wake up now, right this moment. And I couldn't breathe. And my heart was beating so fast, my whole chest hurt for so long. 2 ex-boyfriends had encounters with a black mass in our room that was near me. Ex-A talked to it in his sleep, and according to him, the thing told him it wanted to talk to me and be with me, to which he responded, "No, we're Christians," so he reprimanded and vanished it in the name of Jesus, and demanded it to leave. After a couple of hours, he fell asleep on the couch, sleepily got up, and said things like, "Who are you? What do you want? Why her?" "No, she will not. I asked you to leave. You will not talk to her. Stop now and go. What's your name?" Apparently the thing said its name and he just replied, "Oh." And then he snapped out of it and didn't remember at all what he said or happened. I did it because I was in the kitchen making dinner, petrified. I didn't move not even 1 millimeter because I was so afraid. I didn't want to see anything. Then while eating, he randomly said, "Do you know anyone named the thing said?" I said, "No, I don't." I was 20 years old back then. Then at 21, XB and I were sleeping in his house. It was sometime around 2:30 to 3 a.m. and he got up to have sex. And when he came onto me, I saw a face that made me push away and scream. I went under the blankets scared as fuck and I heard him say, "What the fuck? Who are you? What do you want? How did you enter this place?" XB came to the bed next to me and he started looking at me like he wanted to kill me. And I thought that it possessed him, for fuck's sake. And then he looked behind me and said, "I want you out now." And I felt a sudden urge to leave, to run and go home with my mum. I felt unprotected and terribly vulnerable. I was only wearing a pair of panties, and I ran to the door of his house and stayed there in sudden realization I was basically naked. XB came after me with a shirt and my bra and said, "We're getting out of here, okay? Let's get in the car and let's head to your house or just drive around." We walked back to his room and my body didn't enter. Couldn't move past the door. I heard a voice in my head that said, "Do not enter. You cannot enter." An XB noticed and looked inside the room and saw that black mass figure in my side of the bed. And he said, "Fuck it, use my shorts. Let's get going." We were half naked driving around the city until it was 7 a.m. and the sun was visible. We came back to his house and it felt different. Light even. We slept and that was it. We never saw it again. Fast forward to 27, present time. I moved out of my country and in the past 3 years, I've never seen it again. Never heard anyone say they've seen it or felt it when around me. But very rarely I have nightmares with it just standing there, far from me, just there. It hasn't said anything of the sort like he used to say when I was a teenager. My long-term boyfriend has woken me up once or twice a month saying I'm murmuring. He knows he has to wake me up when he hears me. It's a rule I've imposed on everyone who ever sleeps with me. Now, my younger brother has been having nightmares with a black shadow man chasing him down. He's woken up my mum several times at night screaming. It happened about 6 years ago. I still think about it to this day that something was bothering me at this house I used to sleep at. The story was that I had sometimes had a sleepover at my wife's house, girlfriend at the time, and she and her family had recently moved in for about 1 or 2 years. The first occurrence was when I was sleeping in the living room. We were just done watching movies and she would go sleep upstairs in her room and I'd be sleeping in the living room. It was probably late, around midnight, and as I was laying down with my eyes closed, I felt some sort of presence at a distance behind me. I felt like someone was there walking around and I thought, oh, it's probably her. And shortly after, she called out my name. I began to turn around and about to answer her call out, and to my surprise, there was absolutely nobody. It gave me quite the goosebump that I immediately texted her about it, and so she told her little brother to accompany downstairs and sleep on the other sofa. We did talk about whether the rest of her family felt some sort of presence, and at the time, nothing happened so far, and that it was just me. Second time around when I slept over, her parents were on a business trip, so I got to sleep in her room. We were cuddling to sleep. She's fast asleep, but I was still trying to, as I kind of have a hard time sleeping, as I think I'm sensitive in sensing what's about to happen. Not sure if that's a thing, but anyway, that night, I felt some presence again in the room. Kinda similar to the living room, but a bit more intense. This time, my heart was pounding. I began to feel 2 sets of hands at the bottom of the blanket, slowly climbing up its way to me. The feeling truly intensified. I felt some sort of face, or rather the head of this thing against me. Its presence was so close. Then it did something. It was probably trying to shout or something. I don't know, but it felt like it opened its mouth to suck the life out of me or my energy. I wasn't sure, but when it did that, my body went paralyzed. I guess you can say it's the night terror, as I can't speak, but the only thing I could do was breathe as fast and loud as I can to wake my girlfriend up, so that she could move or nudge my body, in order for me to regain back control. I was wondering till now, what exactly were I dealing with? I felt like this thing targets only me. So I worked in a large bunker complex from World War II and stayed for a night shift the other day. I'm an editor, so I had headphones on most of the time. Every now and then though, I thought I heard some music from somewhere, but brushed it off as just me being tired. At around 1 AM, I went for a smoke in an area that basically only me and my bosses can access. It's an old stairwell used to transport heavy cargo that doesn't fit in any elevator. As I approached the door, I once again heard music, but this time clear as day. As I opened the door, it got really, really loud, like as if someone was sitting with a violin at the bottom of the stairwell. I work on the 4th floor. No other floor has direct access to the stairwell except the very bottom. Needless to say, I was weirded out but thought, maybe some composer uses their free time and practices here. Yeah, I know. Kinda stupid assumption, but the only explanation I had in the moment. The semi-social person I am, I went down to see who was playing and said hello, since the music was actually kinda beautiful. It reminded me a bit of the classical Bioshock music and was, as far as I can tell, played by one single person on one violin. However, after I stepped down for like 4 or 5 steps, the music abruptly stopped. Not in the way that you stop a recording. I could actually hear clattering and folly sounds from handling a string instrument. I went down all the way and looked for any open doors or some way for this person to have gotten in here. However, there was nothing and no one in sight that would suggest someone just played the music there. So, kinda disappointed, I went all the way back up. Bunker's floors are about double the normal height, so I had to walk up around 6 floors. But just as I stepped back into our hallway, the music started again. So I went down again. Surely enough, there was no one there. At that point, my confusion turned into kinda being creeped out. I double-checked if every door was locked, which they were, and if the elevator, which had been out of service for a while, worked again. Maybe that's how they got there. But no, it was still stuck below ground floor as it had for almost a year. So I thought, okay, every door is locked and the only way in here is to have a key through one of the doors on each floor. 5 floors in total. So I went back up and waited, since I was sure to hear someone unlock a door and step into the stairwell. Nope. I reached the top, and at that precise moment, I heard weird violin sounds first, like someone mildly plucking the strings. Then the music set in again, and it was loud, like really loud. So I went down again, only to find nothing again. At that point, I was actually wondering if I was just too exhausted and started to hallucinate or something. That's how I explained the music to me for the rest of the night. It was only the next morning that my stupid brain realised that I recorded the music the first time I heard it loudly, so there's no chance of this being just in my head. My mother was very sick for several years before she passed. She contracted mononucleosis at 50, and when this is contracted as an adult, it can cause a complication of organ failure. She needed a liver transplant and was also having issues with low kidney function due to the illness. She had been in the hospital this entire month before she passed. She seemed like she was getting better, well enough to survive a transplant. She was transferred to the hospital to get her ready for the transplant, but contracted COVID and took a turn for the worst. Now for the premonition part. She had been transferred to a hospital that was a 2.5-hour drive, so I could no longer visit her every day like I had been. I was planning on visiting her the following Saturday, but on the Wednesday before, I just had a feeling that I had to take the next day off to go see her, because she might not make it until Saturday. I sent a message to my boss and put in a request for the next day, Thursday, off. That same night around midnight, I got a call from my stepdad. He spoke with the hospital. They didn't think she would make it. Her lungs were failing and they had to be put her on an ventilator. There was also a blood clot that cut off the blood to her colon and intestines. We had to get there. I called my brother, we drove there, and got there around 2 or 3 a.m. She couldn't open her eyes or speak, but could nod her head yes and no. She could still hear us. We got to say goodbye and how much we loved her before she lost consciousness. She passed that Friday afternoon. She didn't make it to Saturday. The second part is more like what I would consider a real premonition, not just a bad feeling. This is from my brother. He said I could share it. He had a dream that we were all at our grandma's house. There was a bunch of brush at the end of their driveway. It's not in real life. And there was a deer out there. My grandpa, who just passed a little over a year prior, gave my brother a chainsaw to clear the brush and told him to take care of the deer. We all had to agree at the hospital to have them turn the machines off. Her intestines were deteriorating. She needed surgery, but she would never survive. She couldn't get the surgery as she couldn't live if she didn't get the surgery. We were able to ask my mother multiple times beforehand if she wanted everything off, and she vehemently nodded her head yes. And it was in her living that she didn't want a ventilator. Right after the funeral, we went to my grandma's house. At the end of the driveway was a doe. I walked out, got just 10 feet from it, and got a few pictures. It wasn't afraid of me, and when I looked at it, I felt like my mom was checking on us. So I moved about 2 years ago to a new city. Ever since I moved in, I felt entire rooms go cold in minutes, and I felt shivers nobody else in the family has felt. I had to make all new friends, and one of them is related to an experienced medium, and she's also very well versed in ghosts. I know many people don't believe in Ouija boards, and I do take them with a grain of salt. As a joke one day, I decided to mess around with one alone when I felt the shiver. I laughed off the fact I had contacted a 10-year-old girl named Mona and called up my friend to talk about it. Mind you, I do have some strange experiences in my house, like the doors in the bathroom opening on their own, or the sink turning on by itself. So I did think there was something in my house. My friend recommended I try the candle method, where you light a candle and ask yes or no questions. So I tried it in a room with no draft and closed vents. I'd ask a question, and if the answer was yes, the flame would rapidly pop out and down and shake around, to the point where it was coming out of the jar the candle was in. And the Mona I had contacted was supposedly communicating with me. To make a longer story short, I found out there are multiple, 5 that I know of, ghosts in my house, all related to each other from what I've gathered. Today, I thought I'd see if I could find anything on Ancestry, and I found some records with exact names. Now, their names are common: Nadine, Owen, Alexander, Opal, Mona. But I kind of freaked out because I thought I was nuts until I saw the names connected with info I had previously gathered. A friend of mine told me that they might connect more with me since I do enjoy older music, movies, and other media, and they might find it comforting. Some people might think it's BS, but I honestly believe it, and I'm just kind of looking for advice on how to coexist and help make the ghosts more comfortable. Another smaller thing I end this post is, I do an EVP session with Manoa, and in the recording, I swear I heard her say a name, and I got a few other friends to listen it to see if they heard anything without telling them, and they heard variations like Menorah or Moa, but it's generally the same as Manoa. Friend's dad just died after the new year. 10 days ago he called me and asked if he could stay with me for a while. My family refused on account of religious restrictions, but they allowed it when I offered to stay with him, and I did. The first night nothing happened as we talked well into the night. The second night I woke to my mother calling me. It took a while for me to catch up. I went back to sleep thinking it was in my dream, but it happened again the next night. I sat up straight and waited. Nothing. I asked my friend the next morning, and he confessed that this has been happening ever since his father died. He had been hearing his mother calling him only to find her asleep. He told his mother about it, and she dismissed it as a figment of his imagination. Fortunately, one of his cousins who was at his house last month backed him by saying she heard her husband calling her at night for the 3 nights she stayed. She pointed out that the voice seemed to be coming from right outside the rooms they were sleeping in. The thing is, this sort of thing happened to me once years ago. I woke up in the dead of night to my father's voice calling me, only to have my father call me out from my parents' bedroom. This was when my mother warned me not to answer immediately, but wait to be called again. Apparently, this was because the voice always calls when we're half awake, enough to act, but not enough to question. I called my family and told them about the issue. They told me to return home pronto. But my friend had the "please don't leave me" look on his face, so I'm staying. I was told of precautions, but not solutions. I want to help him, but I don't know what to do. Growing up in my parents' home, I've had multiple experiences with the spirits. So has my entire family. Their house is an old Sears kit home built in 1932. My family moved in 1992 or 1993. Can't remember exactly. I was 2 or 3. Ever since moving in, we've had strange encounters. First one I remember is waking up in the middle of the night to go into the kitchen for a glass of water, and there was a see-through figure near the window by the stove. I tried rubbing my eyes to get adjusted in the dark, but the figure was still there, just staring out the window. I ran back to my room and hid under the covers till morning. After waking up, I told my mum and brother what happened, and my brother stated he saw the same thing during the night. It terrified us. Ever since that encounter, I've become infatuated with ghosts. My brother, sister, and I would sometimes sleep in my parents' bed. I'd wake up during the night and have a bad feeling of dread. Then I'd see him standing at the end of the bed watching me. He was tall, pale, had brown eyes and shaggy brown hair. I saw the same man on multiple occasions, but only in my parents' room at night. He would never say anything, just stare at me. The thing is, my mom told me years later that each of us kids told her about seeing the same man. I still wonder to this day who he could be. My sister told us she would also see a woman and 2 children on different occasions, but myself and my brother never saw them. My mom also has experiences in her bedroom, but she never sees anyone. As soon as she'll lay down to sleep, the shades will move in the room. But as soon as she sits up to see what it is, it stops. The air vent isn't on. The windows aren't cracked open. It always happens when she's alone in the bedroom trying to sleep. Still happens to this day. My mom has asked my dad if it happens to him, and he denies it. That's why she can't ever sleep in her bedroom alone. Side note, my dad's a firefighter, so he used to work 24-hour shifts, and has over the years worked nights at other jobs. So on nights she'd sleep with one of us kids or on the couch. It scares her that much. I was home all alone one day. I think I was in high school. I was sitting on my living room couch watching TV when I heard paper shuffling in our den. My mom's desk is in the den. I thought it was my cat, so I yelled for her to stop. The sound stopped for a second, but then started again, as if someone was shuffling through paperwork. I again yelled for her to stop, but it kept happening. I went to the den to see what she was doing, and she wasn't in there, which I thought was strange. I then had to use the bathroom. As I'm about to open the bathroom door, I peer to my right, and there's my cat, sleeping on my bed. I turned cold. I would have seen her walk past me if she was in the den. I went back to the den cautiously and looked around. Nothing. Still the only one home alone. Cat asleep. I sit back down on the couch again, start watching TV to get my mind off things, and once again the sound starts. I decided to ask it to stop, and for some odd reason it did. I've also seen half of a man's face in the den window staring back at me, but when I turned back to my left, no one was there. Still freaks me out to this day. He doesn't resemble the man I saw in my parents' room, so I'm not sure who I saw. The basement is also full of activity. Before the bathroom remodel, the shower curtain would try to get as close to your body as it could, but if you asked it to stop, it would. Freaking me out for the longest time. So glad when my parents finally got a shower door instead. One time, I went into the basement to grab a drink from the fridge, and as I headed upstairs, I heard my brother say my name. I looked over the stairwell and asked, "What?" With no response and no brother in sight, I ran upstairs and my brother was in his room watching TV. Over the years, we've each heard our name called in different areas of the home. Turns out, no one there. Items will go missing and turn up days or months later in different spots than once placed. Someone will hear the basement door open and shut, but it's locked, and no one has come or gone. Items in the kitchen have fallen to the floor for no reason. There's cold spots throughout the home, especially in the basement and den. My sister is still too scared to go to the laundry room herself because she swears there's something watching her in the hall to get to the laundry room that had always been an eerie spot. It's a dark area where the furnace is and where we always kept the cat box. just always feels as if someone's standing behind the furnace. From what my parents have told me, the person who originally owned the house died in it. I'm not sure what form and what year. There was also a deadly car crash in front of the house where the man's car went head on into the tree in the front yard. I've heard stories from friends that people see a man outside my front house at night, walking along the sidewalk and then disappear. They've told me those stories even before I've ever mentioned anything about my parents' house being haunted. I'm just glad we've pretty much coexisted with the ghosts over the years, with some fights here and there. My parents are getting ready to move after being there 26 years. It's going to be sad to see them move with all the good memories we've had, but I do wonder if the ghosts will haunt the new owners. It was early 2014. I was working nights, so on my days off, I'd be up late throughout the night. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd be in my basement, chilling, watching TV or whatnot, when my cat would go crazy following something around unseen. She'd be meowing and running to different spots throughout the basement. This went on for a few nights. So one night, I decided to pull my camera out and start taking pictures once my cat started freaking out. Surprisingly, I caught orbs in multiple pictures. Once I saw an orb in a picture, I decided to communicate with it and it responded. I remember asking the spirit, if you're really a spirit, go by the bathroom door. I took a picture right after and there's the orb right on the bathroom door. Chills went straight through me. I kept communicating with the spirit for an hour or so and caught orbs throughout my basement. My cat went into my bedroom as if seeing something, but I only caught one orb in there. I tried recording a session of me speaking with the spirit, but got no response that way. After a few hours, my cat calmed down and all went back to normal. Even though I knew my childhood home was haunted, I truly believed this was my great-grandma paying me a visit. I had recently at that time kept smelling her scent out of the blue, and on that night, even I smelt her scent prior to all of this happening. Today, I smell her from time to time in my own home. I believe she just stops in to say hi and watches over me. From 5 years old up until 12 years old, I used to hear and see spirits. Our old apartment was haunted and all of us siblings were used to it growing up, but only realised it when we moved to a different house and all of the weird noises and voices and odd occurrences stopped. I remember all of us freaking out when I opened up with the conversation, do you guys remember when doors would shut without anyone doing it? Nor any wind inside the house? Do you guys remember the stairs making sounds like someone was going up and down the stairs? That's when we all started sharing our own stories. Then we all realised that I was the one who experienced the most when I started telling them examples after examples. I'll share 3 memories that I still remember vividly. A quick visit. When I was 5 or 6, I was seated on our couch getting ready for my regular doctor visits. My mum was a nurse, and she takes health and wellness seriously. My mum was facing towards me, putting on my socks, and I was facing the stairs. Our stairs at our old apartment were L-shaped, and it cuts off as it goes past the ceiling. It creates a shadow around the area of it, cutting off past the ceiling. As my mum was putting on my socks, I remember pointing towards our stairs. I asked her who the old man standing over there was. My mum turned around and looked at the spot I was pointing at, and she told me there was no one there. I was confused because I could see a man standing looking down at us. His face was bloody, with a bloody cloth covering half his face. He had a beard and was staring at us. I remember not being scared but more curious. He didn't look malevolent. I kept pointing and my mom told me to describe what he looked like. After I told her what I was seeing, my mom told me that he reminded her of her uncle, who got assassinated while he was gardening at his home. He was shot in the face and died in the hospital, which was not too long ago, but before I was born. She confirmed the story years later and it still creeps me out whenever we talk about it. It needed a rest. Years later, maybe around 10, I was alone in my room. We had a bunk bed because I shared my room with my older brother. The bunk bed was made of metal and had a mesh design underneath the mattress. My brother's spot was at the bottom, and whenever he sits on his bed, the metal mesh makes a squeaky or rusty sound. He always drops down on his bed and never sits on it slowly, giving a quick, squeaky sound. So hearing it on a daily basis, I'm familiar with that sound. One day, I was just chilling on my desk, and my CD player stopped playing after playing the whole album. It was just dead silence. I was sketching something, so I wasn't really bothered by the silence. All of a sudden, I heard my brother's bunk bed make a squeaky sound, but it was very, very slow, like someone was pushing down or sitting down really slow. I immediately froze and I was trying to process what was happening. I started deducing in my mind. I'm alone. My brother is still in his ROTC, and there's no one else in the room beside me. When I realized that it must be something else, I gathered my nerves and told the ghost that I'm scared of ghosts, and I hope he, she, it doesn't show itself. The squeaking stopped, and I remember trembling. I decided it was the moment. I bolted out of the room. Didn't even bother glancing towards the bed. I was legit scared and was screaming as I sprinted down the stairs. I told my parents that there's a ghost in the room, and my parents told me that they don't exist, and that it was just my imagination. Despite telling them every detail of the story, to no avail, they simply reminded me that it must have been something natural like wood creaking or the wind or the neighbours. I'm 100% sure it was the bed. I know that creaking sound and it was very close. Not muffled like it was beyond the walls of our room or from the outside. It was right behind me. It was coming from our bunk bed. Also, how would it make that sound if it's not for someone or something to actually sit or lay on the bed? This memory still gives me the shivers. A gathering. My last memory of a ghost encounter was the year before we moved. I was 12 at this time, and it happened in the middle of the night. It was an uncommon occurrence for me to wake up in the middle of the night. This particular night was the scariest night in my life, and I get a weird feeling in my stomach whenever I think about it. It's not really anything big, like Hollywood level scary, but the sheer terror that I felt and imprints in my memory. So I remember waking up in the middle of the night, for some reason, and I just stared at the ceiling trying to get back to sleep. I was probably half awake at this point. Then all of a sudden, I felt like there's someone right beside my bed, like a presence. So I'm on the top bunk of our bunk bed, and I just felt someone was standing beside the bed. I remember my heart started beating fast, and I immediately went fully awake, and my body just got stiff from this uneasy feeling. Mind you, it wasn't a sleep paralysis episode, because I could move and was actually comfortable when I woke up. So, I decided to gather my strength and look to my right, because I really wanted to know if there was anyone beside my bed out of curiosity. As I looked to my right, I saw 4 figures wearing black, like funeral formal attire looking down on me. They were tall, because even though I was on the top bunk, they were looking down. Their eyes were blurry, but they were anthropomorphic. I could tell that there were 3 males and 1 female. I stared right back at them, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. As it finally clicked in my head that they're spirits or ghosts, I screamed and grabbed a pillow and placed it on top of my head as I pivoted away from them. I was crying and was purely terrified. I started praying and hoping that they wouldn't touch me or come close to me. I remember repeating the Apostles' Creed, prayer for St. Michael, Hail Mary and Glory be. I was raised Catholic. I started my new job at Will Rogers Airport. I say new job, but I was really just moved to a different airline and working in the same ramp agent position. Now, I have to tell you that I have a crippling fear of heights, and my least favourite part of being a ramp agent is when I have to climb in the cargo bin on a rear loading plane because it's about 20 feet above the ground. This particular night was a strange mix of a few factors, creating an uneasy feeling. The first ambient setting condition is it was raining. Not just light raining, but pouring rain with a few scattered lightning flashes and random power surges. Every now and then, we have dead bodies transported in the cargo bins. This was one of those occasions, and tonight was my lucky night apparently, because my manager told me I was throwing this plane. Throwing, meaning I was pulling the cargo out of the bin. It was the last plane for the night, and there wasn't very much cargo beside the body. My co-worker John pulled the ramp loader to the plane and raised it up so I could walk up the conveyor belt to enter the bin. About 4 other co-workers come over with a baggage tug for the cargo. I say to everyone in a louder than normal tone, because the rain was loudly smacking the metal shell of the airplane, I hope you all are ready. I'm not trying to be in there all night. John laughed and said, "Don't worry about it. Maybe you can make a new friend in there," in reference to the body. I didn't think it was funny, but I chuckled and told him to shut up and let's get going. I climbed into the small and cramped space and sat in the bin as far from this human-sized white cardboard box as I could. I pulled my phone out of my pocket to select a playlist to listen to while I threw the bin. I find a good one and I start working. The conveyor belt moves at a snail's pace and you have to wait until they scan each individual package, so I can't just throw them as fast as I want to get out of there. About 10 minutes into it, I'm getting closer and closer to this box and my music stops playing. I've had earbuds that short out when they get wet, so in the front of my mind I automatically assume that rain somehow got on them and I just needed to shake a little water out of them, but they were bone dry. I checked Spotify to see if it was a glitch or problem with the app, and I see I have an unread text. Did I get a notification and forgot in the midst of my rap-fueled baggage handling? The way my phone is set up, when I get a message it will tell you who it's from, but it won't display the message. You have to access them to read it. The message was from an unknown number, which was odd, because very few people have my number to begin with. I clicked the notification to read the message, and all it said was, "Hi." I sent a text back saying, "Hey, who is this?" My phone displayed that whoever sent the message saw mine immediately after it was sent. I waited and no response. I started my playlist back up and got back to my job. Shortly after, a crash of thunder that was so loud the plane shook made me jump at first, but I quickly rationalized it and returned to work. I noticed the conveyor belt was no longer moving. I yelled to John, "What the hell's going on down there? Why did it stop?" John replied, "Damn thing ran out of gas. We're going to take this load of cargo to drop off while we get another loader over here. Sit tight." I think to myself, where the fuck else am I going to go? About 1 minute later, it got cold. Like I could see my breath cold. I wrote it off as just a cold front and reach over for some stranger's luggage to lean on while I wait. As I look over for a bag to grab, lightning went across the sky, and I saw a quick flash of a little boy, 11, maybe 12 years old, sitting on the white box, staring at me with this eerily happy smile, and his head turned slightly to the side. My heart sunk and I froze, never taking my eyes off that box for what felt like hours. I was startled by the replacement conveyor belt starting up right next to the plane. I darted to the moving conveyor belt as fast as I could, trying to keep my balance and panic at the same time. I hit the ground and looked at John and said, "Nope, I'm done. You're going to have to go in there." I didn't want to explain exactly what I saw, but John knew something scared me shitless. He asked me, "What's wrong? Who is it?" I stuttered and walked away before I could say anything. Then I got a new text message notification that I heard loud and clear this time. A response from the unknown sender saying, "It's your new friend."